I knew something was fundamentally broken when I sat through my third executive meeting in a row where a grown man in cufflinks repeated my compliance roadmap like he had come up with it during his morning protein shake. I had written the entire document in a migraine haze after pulling a 12-hour preparation sprint while also studying for my advanced business law final that same evening. But there he was, basking in the warm glow of self-congratulation, while I took notes like a ghost with a corporate security badge. No thank you, Edward. No great work, Edward. Just smug nods from a leadership team that treated audit controls like a suggestion rather than a strict federal requirement. I had learned to live in the fluorescent purgatory of being essential but entirely invisible. If you have ever been the one explaining federal regulations to a vice president who responds by asking if we can just skip that slide because it kills the mood, then you understand my daily reality. I was the corporate killjoy, the human stop sign, the man with the spine to say that a particular action was illegal. Everyone else was worried about social media hashtags and hiring their unqualified relatives. So, I stopped trying to impress them and started building my exit strategy. 3 nights a week, I dragged my laptop into the corner booth of a half-dead diner downtown, ordered the driest turkey sandwich known to humanity, and chipped away at my evening Executive Master of Business Administration degree. I did not advertise it around the office. I just wanted options. I was tired of waking up every morning knowing I was the net under their tightrope. The office had slowly become a pageant of mediocrity. Success was measured by who laughed the hardest at the vice president's jokes. That is when she arrived, Olivia Vance, the vice president's wife, newly appointed as the director of corporate synergy. This title was essentially code for a board member with influence and absolutely no idea what a chief compliance officer actually does. She started showing up to meetings in brightly colored blazers, asking questions about our emotional alignment with the brand. Meanwhile, I was desperately trying to stop the firm from accidentally violating multiple sections of the Investment Advisors Act of 1940. She did not like me. I did not play the corporate game. I did not do bubbly enthusiasm. I did not clap when she suggested putting daily affirmations on the office coffee cups. I would simply smile, nod, and then walk back to my desk to clean up whatever regulatory mess her husband Richard had created by attempting to streamline our documentation. The woman once suggested we make our compliance feel more intuitive, as if the federal government gives points for good vibes. I tolerated it and kept my head down. I knew they did not understand what I did, but they liked that I was quiet, obedient, and predictable. I answered emails at midnight, picked up the phone when they were too scared to talk to external auditors, and rewrote filings that they had screwed up. The truth was, I was the legal duct tape on a yacht made of glitter and delusion. They thought I would never leave. That was their real mistake. When a man like me stops complaining and stops explaining, what they do not realize is that he is not disengaged. He is just done talking. And I was done. Still, I stayed polite. I kept showing up. I kept meeting deadlines no one understood, but everyone benefited from them. I watched them take my data, my insights, and my projections, and pitch them like appetizers at a networking gala. The chief executive officer, Oliver Tate, even quoted my risk mitigation strategy at an investor luncheon and called it his own collective insight. I almost choked on my salad, but I was not angry. Not yet. I was patient. Because here is the thing about compliance. You do not need a spotlight. You just need a timestamp, a signature, and a paper trail. And I had all of it meticulously organized. I was 52 years old, with 25 years of hard-earned experience in the financial sector, and I was not about to let a group of amateurs ruin my reputation. I knew the regulations backward and forward, and I knew exactly how much danger they were in without me steering the ship. The tension had been building for months, simmering beneath the surface of every forced smile and every passive-aggressive email chain. The breaking point was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, creeping realization that the leadership team viewed my role as an obstacle rather than a shield. They were drunk on their own perceived brilliance, convinced that their rapid growth was due to their visionary leadership rather than my tireless efforts to keep them out of federal prison. I watched as they authorized aggressive marketing campaigns that bordered on deceptive, forcing me to work weekends, drafting disclaimers that barely satisfied the legal minimums. I saw them onboard high-net-worth clients from overseas without proper anti-money laundering checks, waving away my concerns with vague promises to fix the paperwork later. They were playing a dangerous game of regulatory roulette, and I was the one forced to spin the chamber. But I kept meticulously documenting every rejected warning, every ignored email, every overridden control. I was building a fortress of evidence, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. I knew that when the music finally stopped, they would scramble to find a scapegoat, and they would look straight at the quiet compliance officer in the corner office. I was determined to ensure that when that day came, I would not be the one left holding the bag. It all happened over champagne flutes and shrimp skewers at a corporate mixer so insufferable it should have come with occupational safety warnings. We were in the courtyard of a boutique hotel downtown, rented out to celebrate some quarterly milestone that no one could actually define. The theme was unity through innovation, which basically meant finger foods and forced laughter under string lights while a disc jockey played sanitized 80s hits. I was standing off to the side sipping a club soda because I still had an accounting final later that night. That was when she found me, Olivia Vance, the newly crowned queen of synergy, wearing a lemon-yellow pantsuit and a necklace the size of a small wind chime. She floated over like a perfume advertisement, her lips curled in that tight, pitying smile she saved for people who use the standard employee parking lot. I knew the moment was coming. She had been circling me for weeks, sniffing for weakness, and now, surrounded by executives with half-drunk cocktails, she finally pounced. "Oh, Edward," she said, laying a hand on my arm like I was about to faint. "I heard you were still doing that little evening school thing. How quaint." I blinked. She tilted her head. "Do not take this the wrong way, but it is honestly kind of unprofessional, is it not? We need people fully committed to the company, not chasing side projects during cocktail hour." That last part landed like a dart to the neck. The table behind us went quiet. Then the laughter started, low, scattered, polite. That fake little chuckle that people do when they know something is mean, but want to stay in the good graces of those in power. I did not say a word. I just smiled, nodded, and took another sip of my club soda. Let them laugh. Let her win the room. I had already passed my corporate expiration date in their eyes. I was just waiting for them to notice. The real kicker was that her comment was not offhand, it was planned, because 4 hours later, still in my suit from the mixer, I got called into the Human Resources office. The representative, Melissa, had the energy of a substitute yoga teacher and the vocabulary of a malfunctioning artificial intelligence. "We have just observed a growing misalignment, Edward. A sort of cultural divergence," she said, acting like she was trying to diagnose a rash without making eye contact. "You have been so heads down lately. It is like you are not really here with us." I could have laughed out loud. Not here with them? I was the only reason half the organization's filings had not been shredded by a federal regulator. "You are incredibly smart, obviously," she added quickly. "But sometimes brilliance does not translate. You know, this place runs on trust and harmony." I leaned back in my chair, watching her sweat through a script she clearly did not write. "Are you firing me?" I asked calmly. "Oh heavens, no, no," she said, flapping her hands like that made it less insulting. "We are offering you the chance to exit gracefully. A soft landing, a chance to focus on your schoolwork, maybe." She even smiled like she was doing me a massive favor. That is the moment something shifted inside me. Not rage, no, that came later, but something cleaner, sharper. It was like I finally saw the machinery behind the curtain and realized how foolish the wizard really was. I asked one simple question. "Who is replacing me as Chief Compliance Officer?" She blinked. "Oh, well, I assume the legal department will absorb your responsibilities. We will delegate." Olivia is really passionate about internal values. Of course she was. That woman thought a whistleblower was a sports position. I nodded slowly. "Understood," I replied. She handed me a thick packet. I did not open it. I did not need to open it. I recognized the template. I had written half the language in it myself back when I helped draft the exit policies for the firm. "Edward," Melissa said, her voice soft like she was tucking me into bed. "You have done good work here, but it is time to let someone more culturally aligned take it from here." I stood up and smoothed my jacket. I will consider the offer. Thank you. She looked relieved, mistaking my calm demeanor for compliance once again. And that is when I knew I was not going to sign a damn thing. Not because I needed the job, but because I knew something they completely failed to grasp. They had not filed the change in compliance officer with the Federal Regulatory Commission, and I was certainly not going to remind them. The next morning, I came in like it was any other Tuesday. No dramatic entrance, no cardboard box, just me in my navy suit, face completely unreadable. The office was already buzzing with the usual corporate delusions. Someone was loudly celebrating a synergy breakthrough in the break room. Richard Vance was shouting across the floor about a podcast that really understands leadership. No one noticed I was walking into my own funeral. I had already backed up everything personal from my company laptop. What little there was consisted of a folder of old tax documents, a photo of my golden retriever, and a saved draft of my capstone project titled Liability Cascades in Unregulated Systems. I went straight to my office, shut the door, and powered on the machine one last time. I opened my inbox. Hundreds of threads remained unread. Half of them were probably urgent. Most of them were entirely pointless. A few were from the legal team, still trying to get clarification on my flagged note about international gift thresholds. I deleted them all without a second thought. I was completely finished being their shield. Then I drafted one final email. It was plain, precise, and entirely unemotional. Subject: departure notice immediate to Legal, Human Resources, Chief Executive Officer, Compliance Team. Dear all, this message serves as formal notice of my immediate resignation from the role of Chief Compliance Officer. My access credentials have been relinquished and all materials have been returned. Please ensure the uniform application for investment advisor registration is updated accordingly to reflect this change with the Regulatory Commission. Wishing you all continued success. Best, Edward Stanton. I read it twice. No flair, no bitterness, just clean surgical language. The way compliance is supposed to sound. Cold, clear, final. I hit send, stood up, and grabbed my security badge off the desk. The plastic was warm from the morning sun streaming through the blinds. I walked it to the front desk, placed it on the counter, and handed the receptionist my laptop. "You are leaving for the day?" asked Oscar, the young intern working the front desk, looking very confused. "No," I said, "I am leaving." Oscar blinked. "Like leaving? I smiled, exactly, and then I walked out. No drama, no tears, no exit speech with the staff awkwardly clapping because someone from Human Resources forced them to show up. There was just the sound of my dress shoes against polished concrete and the knowledge that every step away was one closer to clean air. What no one knew, what not a single soul in that building seemed to grasp, was that you cannot just have a chief compliance officer in name only. It is not a hat you pass around like Office Secret Santa. You have to file it, register it, notify the federal government, and until you do, the last one on record is the one they hold entirely responsible. That was still me, and they had just let me walk out the front door, with that massive responsibility hanging over the company like a loaded weapon. They did not even see the note about the regulatory form. That was my tell. A warning grenade with a 12-hour delay. Because if they knew what they were doing, they would scramble. They would panic. They would get on the phone with outside legal counsel, call the commission, and do everything they could to amend the filings before the next quarterly review. But I knew them well. I knew their hierarchy of urgency. If it did not bleed on the instant messaging channels or scream on a financial dashboard, it simply did not exist. They would not read the email, or worse, they would read it and fundamentally misunderstand it. That is the real danger of arrogance. It does not just make you blind, it makes you comfortable being blind. And by the time they realized what my silence truly meant, they would have already signed my name to things I no longer had a legal obligation to protect. I walked 3 blocks to a diner, ordered black coffee and eggs over medium, and opened my notebook. That morning's study topic was strategic failure as a function of leadership negligence. I underlined it twice. The morning after I walked out, my phone buzzed at 6:43. It was not a call, just a screenshot from a friend still stuck inside the belly of the beast. It showed a message chain so tone-deaf I could practically smell Richard's expensive cologne through the screen. Richard wrote, "Edward is out. Let us just have Olivia own compliance for now. She is already running Synergy. How hard can it be? A legal intern replied, do we not need to file something official with the federal regulators like an amendment? Richard responded, we will circle back, focus on morale. Let us not spook the staff. I stared at that thread for a long time, my spoon hovering over my oatmeal. The word morale in that man's mouth was like glitter on a sinking ship. Olivia, the self-declared empath, who once said legal terminology is a trauma response, was now covering compliance like it was a last-minute baby shower shift. She had shadowed me once during a training session and spent the entire time drawing intricate patterns in her notebook, nodding like I was explaining horoscopes, instead of strict federal record-keeping mandates. I closed my phone and let it burn. For a split second, something twisted in my chest. Guilt, perhaps. Maybe some old reflex tugging at me to intervene, to warn someone, to care. I had spent 5 long years patching holes in their boat while they danced on the deck and handed each other fancy titles. I used to think my loyalty was to the company, but companies do not love you back. They send an underqualified representative to do the breakup, then replace you with someone who still believes Synergy is an actual strategy. They had always treated compliance like an annoying seatbelt alarm, something you ignore until the car eventually crashes, and now they had given the keys to someone who did not even have a license. I took another bite of oatmeal and opened my own laptop. I started drafting my capstone project in earnest. The title was now crystal clear: The Illusion of Oversight. How executive complacency breeds institutional risk. Meanwhile, inside that glass and metal mausoleum of bad decisions, things were rapidly unraveling. The legal department tried to schedule a meeting with Olivia about upcoming reporting obligations. She declined, stating she was swamped redesigning the employee onboarding experience. That same intern kept pushing, flagging that without a named and registered chief compliance officer on file, the firm could technically be in breach of federal rules. Oliver Tate's response was that he did not have time for hypotheticals, and there it was. The magic trick executive teams pull on themselves. They treat every warning like a vibe check until it becomes a federal subpoena. The intern messaged me on my personal email, hesitant, probably afraid I would report him. He wrote that he knew I was not there anymore, but he just wanted to say I was right about everything. I did not reply. There was a time when I would have marched back in there, ready to steer the ship away from the rocks. But ships captained by fools deserve the iceberg, and I had spent too long pretending I was part of the crew. In reality, I was the only one holding the compass. I did not need revenge. I just needed distance. But karma, as it turns out, had already packed its briefcase and started making calls. And the first ring was coming from the Federal Regulatory Commission. It hit my inbox around 2 in the afternoon, tucked between a spam message about digital partnerships and an invitation to a networking event. At first, I almost ignored it. The sender's name was familiar in the vaguest way. Elias Ford, Associate Auditor for the Regional Division. We had crossed paths briefly at a compliance roundtable a year back. He was new then, nervous, and had asked if we had any modern training materials to share. Now, he was in my inbox with a message that read, "Hello, Edward, just a heads up. We are dropping by Summit Peak Wealth Management tomorrow morning for a standard compliance review. Random audit, nothing major. Hope you are well." I stared at the screen for a long moment. I read it again, letting the words sink into my brain. Random audit tomorrow morning. I smiled. It was not a smirk. It was not a laugh. It was just the kind of smile you give a chessboard when your opponent forgets. Your bishop has been parked behind their knight the entire game. It was the kind of smile that comes from knowing the fall is already mid-air and you did not have to lift a single finger. I typed back a measured response. "Hello, Elias. Appreciate the heads up. I am no longer affiliated with the firm. I resigned earlier this week. Please feel free to reach out to their legal department directly for any coordination. All the best, Edward." There were no emojis, no exclamation points, just the clean scalpel of professional detachment. Then I opened a new email and forwarded the thread to my personal attorney. The subject line read, "For your information, regulatory contact." In the body, I added a brief note. "Looks like they are walking into a massive storm. No chief compliance officer on file, no formal transition plan. The timing could not be any better. Let me know if we need to get ahead of anything. I have pristine records of everything, Edward. I hit send and closed my laptop, sitting there for a second in the quiet of my apartment. The hum of the refrigerator and the occasional bark from a dog down the street were the only sounds. I thought I might feel something. Pity, maybe concern, a little echo of the version of me that used to stress eat almonds while double-checking a single line item on a disclosure form, because the vice president wanted it reworded to feel friendlier. But no, that version of me did not live here anymore. Letting the crash happen was not malicious. It was heavily overdue. They had built the entire compliance structure like a theatrical set piece, something that looked good under soft lighting, but would instantly collapse if anyone leaned on it too hard. I was the structural scaffolding, and when they pushed me out for not clapping hard enough at their synergy slides, they genuinely thought the structure would hold. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I did not tell anyone. I did not warn the intern or the legal team or even the sweet receptionist, who once offered me half her muffin during a fire drill. This was not because I wanted them hurt, but because if you stand on a collapsing stage long enough, eventually the floor stops caring who your favorites are. I spent the rest of the afternoon going for a long walk. It was just me, an audiobook, and the soft crunch of dead leaves under my walking shoes. When I got back, I brewed some strong tea and sat down to finish the third chapter of my project. The title of the section was False Delegation and the Danger of Assuming Institutional Memory. At 5:36, my phone buzzed again. It was another screenshot, this time from the brave young intern. Oliver Tate wrote, "Does anyone know who is leading tomorrow's audit preparation?" Richard Vance chimed in, "Olivia's in wine country for a family engagement. Can someone loop in our actual compliance person?" The legal department replied, "Edward, resign. There has been no replacement filed with the government." Oliver Tate typed back, "What the hell is a regulatory amendment form?" I turned off my phone, drank my tea, and simply waited. At exactly 9 in the morning, a man in a navy suit with government-issued posture walked into the front lobby of the company's glass fortress. He had a clipboard in hand, a badge proudly displayed, and a face that was calm in that uniquely terrifying federal way. He introduced himself to the receptionist, asked to speak with the chief compliance officer, and handed over his business card like it was just another ordinary Tuesday. His name was Elias Ford, associate auditor. Oscar, the intern covering the front desk, smiled nervously and said that Edward was not in today. Elias raised a single eyebrow. "Edward Stanton, he is still your registered chief compliance officer?" "Yes." Oscar hesitated. "I think he left the company." Elias did not frown, did not blink. He just made a deliberate note on his clipboard. "Then I will wait here," he announced softly. 10 minutes later, the legal department got wind of the situation. A paralegal came sprinting into the general counsel's office, whispering frantically about an unannounced regulatory visit. The auditor asked for Edward directly. Within 60 seconds, 3 different lawyers were flipping through thick paper binders like it was 2003. The general counsel was shouting into his desk phone. Someone finally ran to the break room to yank the chief executive officer away from his coffee. Oliver Tate walked into the boardroom where the auditor was now seated, calmly sipping bottled water. He looked up, polite as ever. "Good morning," Elias said. "We are conducting a standard compliance review. I would just like to review the recent filings with your chief compliance officer." Oliver blinked twice, his face pale. "Edward no longer works here," he stated flatly. Elias made another note on his clipboard. "Ah, then who has been designated as your compliance officer on your official filing since his departure?" The silence that followed hit the room like a pulled fire alarm. Someone from Human Resources muttered something about transition planning. A junior counsel fumbled frantically with his laptop, desperately trying to locate any official notice of reassignment. Elias folded his hands on the table. "Just to confirm, since Edward Stanton is still the last registered officer on file, any financial filings submitted after his resignation would be considered, at minimum, in need of a formal legal amendment. At worst, depending on the disclosures, they are potentially in violation of strict federal laws against misrepresentation." Oliver tried to smile, bringing out that slippery public relations grin he wore during massive layoffs. I am sure this is just a minor administrative oversight. We have a very robust culture here. Elias cut him off without raising his voice. Culture is not compliance, Mr. Tate. That is when the legal team started to sweat. Not the glossy discomfort of tense investor calls, but that gut-wrenching, freezing realization that something had gone fundamentally wrong. Someone finally pulled up the federal database. Sure enough, Chief Compliance Officer Edward Stanton's status was active. The last update was filed 3 days ago, post-dated to include revised asset figures, and it was submitted by someone using my exact login credentials. The room completely froze. That filing was submitted after my resignation email, after my badge had been turned in. Legally speaking, it was a completely fraudulent submission, carrying the weight of federal wire fraud and identity theft. Elias did not yell. He just leaned back comfortably in his chair. I will need to open a formal line of inquiry. Oliver's hand visibly trembled as he reached for his glass of water. Out in the world, I was making breakfast. My dog was barking at the delivery driver outside. I had soft jazz playing in the background and a notebook open on my dining table. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote at the top, Chapter 4, The Inevitable Collapse. Underneath it, I jotted the first line. Never let someone else file federal documents in your name, especially if you have already walked out the door. I took a bite of my bagel and smiled. In that boardroom, they were just starting to understand the absolute magnitude of their mistake. But they still had a very long way to fall. The news headline came through around 1 in the afternoon. I had been staring at my laptop screen when a notification from a major financial blog popped up in the corner. It read, Breaking, federal regulators open inquiry into Summit Peak Wealth Management over filing irregularities. I almost laughed out loud, but instead I just leaned back, took a slow sip and clicked to read the article. The write-up was short and surgical. It noted that the Commission had discovered misfiled regulatory documents listing a former executive, Edward Stanton, as the compliance officer days after his documented resignation. The filings included quarterly asset adjustments now under review for potential misrepresentation and fraud. Legal analysts noted the violation could trigger broader criminal investigations into the firm's leadership. That word, fraud, was doing a lot of quiet damage. My phone buzzed nonstop for the next hour. There were missed calls, text messages, and frantic screenshots. 2 different reporters reached out, asking if I would be willing to comment on the recent activity at my former firm. I did not reply to any of them. Instead, I copied the headline and pasted it into the top of my capstone draft. I had been workshopping the opening hook for days, and now it started perfectly. In the year 2026, a mid-sized financial firm became a prime case study in executive liability and federal fraud. The company reached out through a high-priced lawyer first. They sent a carefully worded email to my attorney, proposing a strategic re-engagement. It was their desperate way of begging me to come back and clean up the massive bloodstain before the federal prosecutors arrived. The board offered a lucrative 6-month advisory contract with massive pay. I sent it to my lawyer with a single instruction: draft the decline and keep it surgical. The next morning, they received a 1-paragraph reply stating that Mr. Stanton had no interest in remediation and had preserved all communications for the federal authorities. I filed documentation under whistleblower protection, submitting emails, meeting notes, and internal messages proving their negligence. Investors began demanding their money back. Richard and Olivia Vance were quietly removed from the company roster. The chief executive officer was forced to resign in disgrace. I did not want revenge, but I got justice. The kind that holds up in federal court, the kind that speaks loudest when everyone else has finally stopped talking.